Hi everyone, this is Andrew Prima, Ukrainian American, reporting from Kiev. In today's podcast, week 75 of Russian aggression, and this is the first week of August 2023. In today's podcast, we're going to talk about Ukraine's successful drone attack on Russian ships and capital of Russia, Ukraine shelling Crimea daily, and what are the factors that might change this war. So, Kiev hit Moscow in the second drone attack. A skyscraper in Russia's capital, Moscow, has been attacked by a drone for the second time in 2 days, said Mayor of Moscow Sergei Sobyanin. He said several drones were shut down overnight on Monday, but one flew into the same tower at the Moscow city complex that was targeted this day. Kiev didn't comment on responsibility but warned Russia that the conflict could soon move to its territory. No one was just injured in the skyscraper attack. Moscow mayor said that IQ Quarter Tower 1 building glazing was destroyed over 150 square meters. Two more Ukrainian drones were shot down by anti craft systems elsewhere in the Moscow region, Russia's defense ministry said, claiming to have thwarted a Ukrainian terrorist attack. Moscow's Vnukovo airport was also briefly closed, Russian news agencies reported. Moscow has repeatedly accused Ukraine of carrying out drone strikes on its territory in recent months, including one on the Kremlin, Putin said in an official statement. Last weekend, Ukrainian drones hit a key Russian seaport, damaging a naval ship. According to the Ukrainian officials, sea drones have attacked a key Russian port on the Black Sea, damaging a naval ship. Speaking about the latest in a series of strikes inside Russia after Kiev promised to bring the fight home to the Kremlin. According to a security service official, Oligorsky Gornyak, a landing ship, suffered a serious breach in the attack carried out by Ukraine's Navy and Security Service. As a result, the ship cannot carry out its combat mission anymore, said the official who spoke anonymously because he was not authorized to give such information. Ukrainian news agencies carried footage from social media channels that they suggested showed that Alinigorsky Gornyak listed listing two on side. According to Russian media report, the ship is designed to transport troops and heavy equipment and was sent for repairs in 2014. It's normally based on Russia's Northern Fleet in the Arctic. The Caspian Pipeline Consortium, which operates an oil terminal in the port, said maritime traffic was halted for the few hours, but its facilities were not damaged. The regional government said there were no casualties. During a conference call with reporters, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov refused to comment on this attack. August's fourth attack is the latest in a string of assaults by Ukraine inside Russian territory. The past week, drones hit a building in Moscow, and in May, two drones struck the Kremlin but caused little damage. The port assault was carried out as the Black Sea has become an increasingly important battleground since Russia withdrew from a deal that allowed Ukraine grain shipments across the sea. Since scrapping the deal, Russia has hammered Ukraine's port, compounding a blow to food supplies worldwide. On August 2nd, a Russian drone caused significant damage and a large fire at facilities in the Odessa region that are key to Ukrainian grain exports. A day earlier, the Russian military said Kiev's forces tried to attack two patrol vessels in the sea, southwest of the Russian controlled city of Sevastopol, on the annexed Crimean Peninsula. The Ukrainian drones demonstrated remarkable technical characteristics. The successful attack of SBU maritime drones together with the navy of the Russian amphibious ships in Novorossiysk Bay is an outstanding operation of the Ukrainian special services, which seriously changed the situation in the Black Sea. Despite the increased measures to protect its latest naval base and the largest commercial port, the Russian Navy, as it turned out, is unable to defend itself against attack by Ukrainian naval drones. The drones demonstrated outstanding technical characteristics to plan an attack on Novorossiysk and the Crimean Bridge, a drone with a range of more than 1,000 kilometers and a high quality control system is needed. That is, Ukraine can attack any Russian object on the Black Sea. And now Russia must concentrate even more forces for the defense of its port, ships. It spent huge resources on that. All this was done literally from scratch because before the beginning of the Russian invasion, Ukraine didn't develop such types of weapons at all. Russian maritime trade is a legitimate target for Ukrainian retaliatory strikes, and not only in the Black Sea, but also far beyond the borders of the Black Sea. Russian ships cannot longer feel safe anywhere. Also, Ukrainian drone attacks occur every day in the Crimea. On August 1st, there were explosions in Sevastopol. The local authorities tried to convince everyone that Russian forces shut down Ukrainian drones. It was disoriented by radio electronic means and it fell in the field. But experts very clearly calculated that one of the arsenals of the Black Sea fleet of Russian is located there. On the morning of August 2nd, the same explosion took place in the village very close to Simferopol. Local representatives of the occupation forces said that there are no consequences of the strike, but the explosions took place where the airfield is located. Also, after the last two explosions that took place on July 17th, the Crimean bridge was badly damaged. Repair work is taking place there. Till now, the occupiers first announced that they would repair it all by November, but then they were forced to say it will be repaired by the end of December of this year. Now Russians are building barricades to prevent, as they think, an attack by surface drones on the construction of the bridge. The bridge works is in manual mode. Fewer and fewer people try to use it. I mean, those who illegally enter the territory of Crimea from the territory of the aggressor country, because they are already aware of the threats that might await them on this bridge. They're trying to additionally regulate it with a ferry service. They foresaw that the bridge would be attacked, that it would become a target of the armed forces of Ukraine again and again. Due to this, the cargo is sent through the alternative road. That's what they call the corridor that was created from the occupied Crimea through the occupied regions of the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions to the territory of the Russian Federation, Rostov region. They're trying to distribute the load of the bridge in this way. If we return to August strikes, experts claim that one of the arsenals of the Russian Black Sea Fleet is located where the explosions took place, in the Kiev district on July 19th. The detonation lasted for more than 2 days. Russians built an ammunition depot, but you see, they didn't manage to hide it that far. And then the same warehouses were destroyed in the Jankoy district in the village of Vilne, an oil storage facility in the village of Oktyabrsk. I name only those objects that are directly interrelated with the capabilities of the Russian troops. They're either ammunition or fuel or equipment. But when all Ukrainian attacks happened, Russia realized that they would not be able to defend Crimea. And this realization is actually worth a lot. So, what are the key factors that might affect the war outcome? Almost 2 months after the start of the counteroffensive by Kiev, launched in 2023, Ukraine established a certain pace of hostilities and pauses in military operations, which was also observed in other major wars. Ukrainian ground forces are slowly advancing along the Donetsk axis of attack as well as the Zaporizhia axis, using the principle of the bite and hold. Some progresses can be seen in the Bakhmut area. So, what are the key factors? Logistics and transport hubs. Battles for logistics and transport hubs continue with the deep Ukrainian battle. In the east and the south, the Ukrainians continue to strike at the key points that provide Russia with the transport and logistic hubs necessary for Russia's large scale military defense operations. Recently, the Ukrainians hit the Changar Bridge. The armed forces continue to strike these deep facilities, and tactical strikes are aimed at capturing such nodes in close combat. Another key factor, decising the initiative on a battlefield. In the south, Ukraine has tactical initiative and is conducting its breakthroughs and attacks on at least two main lines of attack. In the east, the initiative in the battle for Bakhmut also belongs to Ukraine. In the north, the Russians are conducting a small offensive in the direction of Kremina Svyatov, which forces forces of Ukraine to react. The Ukrainians didn't achieve the quick breakthrough that many unrealistically hoped for in the first days of counteroffensive, but they are slowly wearing down Russian forward forces in the south, as well as Russian headquarters, logistics, and artillery. Russia's southern forces may face some danger in the coming weeks if their attrition continues, shifting the balance of power in Ukraine's favor. At the operational level, I think the Ukrainians still retain the initiative with some combat forces in reverse. However, with most of their reserves headed south and some of them potentially able to hold against any Russian offensive in Luhansk, the Ukrainian commander in chief will have to strike a careful balance in the coming weeks. So, another very important point, the adaptation battle. The subject of how both sides have adapted during the war has been one of the central themes of all this strategy and tactics since February 2022. In the south, the Russians adapted, including building fake trenches with booby traps designed to lure and then kill and maim Ukrainian soldiers. The Russians are also using their attack helicopters with greater efficiency than we have ever seen in this war. As noted in a recent British intelligence report, the helicopter Ka 52 were armed with the new anti tank missiles El Mur 15-kilometer range, which increased their effectiveness on the battlefield. As for Ukrainians, their tactics have changed since the start of the Ukrainian offensive in June 2023 as well. Instead of trying to quickly break through Russian defenses, the Ukrainians are now acting more deliberately in using bite and hold tactics to preserve their combat power. This idea, developed during World War I, was for the troops to capture and hold small areas of enemy territory, that advance again under the cover of artillery fire. I truly believe further adaptation will probably be needed to overcome Russian defense more quickly in the south. Ukraine needs to transform the technology and tactics of minefield detection, mapping, clearance, and marking. This is an imperative for close combat by Ukrainians, as well as a humanitarian task of demining and decontamination of the consequences of the war through the territory of Ukraine. Finally, the Ukrainians continue to adopt their long range strikes activity in the air and at the sea. Although President Zelensky recently called on the West to provide more long range strike weapons, Ukraine now appears to be able to launch periodic small scale drone strikes against Moscow. At the same time, the development of marine attack drones of the Navy of Ukraine continues, as we spoke about that a few minutes earlier. So the next one of the important points, a battle of attrition. Any military activity is accompanied by exhaustion. During war, this is exacerbated by combat losses, injuries, and illnesses, as well as psychological trauma. Key elements of the battle of attrition in Ukraine remains the struggle to reduce the combat capacity and number of Russian forces deployed on the front lines. As part of this larger struggle for attrition, industrial production in the West is only slowly adapting to Ukraine's ammunition needs. American production alone is unlikely to be able to meet all of Ukraine's needs in the near future. A recent article by Financial Times notes that Ukrainians currently need up to 8,000 artillery shells per day. The US is also currently working to increase its supply of shells with the goal of producing up to 90,000 shells per month by fiscal year 2025, up from 24,000 now. Now, another very important point is struggle for strategic influence. Finally, beyond the battlefield in Ukraine, both sides seek to gain an advantage in the battlefield for strategic influence. While many will focus on the tactical aspects of campaign, Ukraine's and Russia's strategic influence campaigns continue to unfold at an accelerated pace. We continue to be bombarded with reports from the Russian sources about the failure of Ukrainian offensives. In addition, the new narrative is that the Ukrainian offensive is hindering peace talks. There are also some evidence that the Russian government is manipulating Russian bloggers so that Russia can better cope with the struggle for strategic influence. As a recent International Study of War Institute reports, that the lack of reaction from Russian military bloggers to the Ukrainian strike on the Changar Bridge represents a notable shift in Russian reporting on the war in Ukraine and may indicate that the Kremlin has ordered Russian bloggers to refrain from covering certain topics. Politicians, war analysts, military commanders, and other top leaders have predicted different outcomes of this war. So, what actually can happen? What the possible outcomes? Hundreds of people, researchers, war specialists, commanders predicting what can change this piece of the war. However, each new significant event can totally change the end of this war. For example, as the Wagner Group coup in June did, they could speed up the wars and or postpone it for an unpredictable length of time. Some war experts predicted that Ukraine would receive all the promised equipment, Western weapons, and we would quickly march toward the 1991 borders through all Russian fortifications. Well, it's not that simple. Ukraine's armed forces use shells and rockets at a faster rate than they arrive. Other predictions we have heard that Russian soldiers will get demoralized. The Russian military will not have enough new conscripts to join, or it will run out of rockets, shells, and heavy equipment. Well, none of this happened. Russians keep producing shells and rockets 24 hours a day and continue to send new troops to the front lines. Also, you might know that the Russian population living in remote regions of the country is so poor that they are happy to join the army for $2,000 a month, which is one of the year's salary in their areas. Also, we thought we could change the war with air superiority achieved with Western fighter jets. Well, also, it hasn't been that simple. We will not get enough of them, and who knows when these F-16s will arrive, or when the Ukrainian jet jet pilots will train on those jets. We can go through all those possible options, and there will be always but some obstacles. However, according to the latest week events, we clearly see that one of the possible solutions to ending this war might look like Ukraine damaged two Russian ships using naval drones, attacked Moscow with aerial drones, and kept increasing the number of attacks through the enemy skies. It is worth mentioning that this is the only strategy and solution where do not have we don't depend on anyone and do not have to ask anyone's permission. We need the drone army, not just a drone army, a massive drone army with dozens of drone types and thousands of them produced monthly. It might be the only solution and the quickest way to force the Russian elite to remove Putin from power. It could be if Ukraine's armed forces can launch 100 drones from all directions to the center of Moscow every night. These drones should target the center of Russian wealth, where the elite has the most expensive real estate offices. If 15 or 20 drones can finally reach their target and get the job done in a few months, this war will take a different turn, a completely different turn. Thank you for listening. If you like my podcast, please share with your friends.